So what's actually happening in your brain when you overspend? It starts with a chemical called dopamine.
Most people think dopamine is a reward. TAM, the good feeling you get after buying something. But that's not quite right. Dopamine actually fires before the purchase, the moment you anticipate getting something new. That's the twist. Your brain isn't rewarding you for buying, it's rewarding you for wanting. This is the same mechanism that makes scrolling addictive, that makes notifications addictive, and yes, online shopping. Every limited time offer, every countdown timer, every one-click checkout button is engineered, often deliberately to spike that anticipation response as high as possible. And here's what makes it so hard to fight. This loop bypasses your logical brain entirely. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for weighing, do I actually need this, is slower and weaker than the anticipation response in the limbic system. By the time your logical brain catches up, but you've often already clicked buy. This isn't a character flaw. It's basic neuroscience, and it affects nearly everyone, kapow. From teenagers buying skins in a video game to executives buying a third car they don't need. Understanding this is the first step, because you can't out-willpower a system that was never designed to be beaten by willpower alone. You have to work with the wiring, not against it. And that starts with recognizing the exact moment the anticipation spike happens. Because that moment, it turns out, is where you actually have the most power to intervene. Now here's turning point 2. Overspending isn't only about anticipation plan, it's also about regulation. When you're stressed, anxious, or lonely, spending money activates that same reward pathway, temporarily numbing whatever you're feeling. Researchers call this retail therapy, but the science behind it is real. A small purchase can measurably lower cortisol for a short window of time. The problem is that relief doesn't last, so the brain goes looking for the next hit. That's why so many people say they can't remember buying half the things. The purchase was never really about the item at all. Sitting in their closet. It was about escaping a feeling for 30 seconds. And once you see that, you can't unsee it, parda. Every impulse buy becomes a signal, not a decision. Which brings us to turning point 3. A huge amount of spending has nothing to do with need or even mood, but it's about status. Humans are wired to compare. For most of history, that comparison kept you alive, told you exactly where you stood in the group. We are still hardwired for it. Today, that same ancient wiring gets triggered by a stranger's post, a coworker's new car, a neighbor's renovation. You're not consciously thinking, I want to look richer. Your brain is just running a status tracking program, using a modern income, and retailers know this better than you do. Luxury brands don't really sell stitching or materials pod. They sell belonging and the feeling of being seen a certain way. A gym membership isn't just about the equipment, it's about who you become in other people's eyes. And once you notice this pattern, something shifts. You start asking a different question before every purchase. Not, can I afford this? But whose approval am I actually chasing right now? That question alone changes everything. But there's a fourth piece to this puzzle. Your brain is wired to value now far more than later, even when later is objectively the better deal. Economists call this hyperbolic discounting. The further away a reward is, the less real it feels to your brain, even if the math clearly favors waiting. That's why buy now, pay later is so effective. It removes the one moment where your brain might actually pause, the moment of paying. No pain of payment, no friction. Studies actually show people spend up to 83% more when paying with card instead of cash comms, because cash makes the loss feel real and immediate, and card makes it feel abstract. So the goal isn't to shame yourself for wanting things now, cow. It's to rebuild a little bit of
friction back into the process, enough friction to let your slower, smarter brain catch up before the card ever gets tapped. And that friction, it turns out, can be as simple as a single habit we'll get to shortly. But before we get to that habit, let's talk about turning point 5. The mental shortcuts retailers already know. How to trigger. The first is called anchoring. If you see a jacket priced at $300, then marked down to $150, your brain anchors to the 300 and treats 150. Shortcut is the decoy effect. Ever notice a small popcorn for $4, a medium for $7, and a large for $10? A large for $7.50? The medium exists purely to make the large look like the obvious choice banal. It's a decoy, not a real option. And the third shortcut is scarcity. Only 3 left. Sale ends tonight. Scarcity hijacks the same threat response system that once warned you about actual danger, not a mist. Work because they're engineered by people who understand the psychology behind overspending and how to beat it. Spend with purpose, live with freedom. Study exactly how your brain works, which is exactly why the fix isn't more willpower go, it's better awareness, and that's what we build next. There's one more layer beneath all of this, and it might be the deepest one. Sometimes, you're not buying you're buying a version of yourself. The expensive gym membership isn't really about the pay, it's about becoming the type of person who works out. The camera you don't really need. About photography pant. It's about becoming the type of person who documents a beautiful life. Marketers figured this out decades ago, Brano. That's why ads rarely sell features anymore. They sell a scene, the person you'd become, the life you'd be living, the person who'd finally have it together. And the uncomfortable truth is the item almost never delivers that identity. You buy the running shoes, and you're still the same person. The next morning, just with less money and one more thing in the closet. This isn't about never buying things that reflect who you want to be, Ty. It's about noticing when a purchase is standing in for the actual work of becoming that person hounds. The habit, the practice, the discipline perhaps, instead of supporting it. Which brings us to turning point 7, and this one explains why debt feels so different from cash. Your brain actually processes paying with debt differently than paying with money you already have. Neuroscientists call this the pain of paying, the small mental wins you feel when money actually leaves your hand. Credit cards, and even tapping your phone to pay, all separate the spending moment from the paying moment. Which means that wins either shrinks or disappears entirely. And when the pain of paying disappears, so does one of your brain's few natural brakes on spending. This is part of why average credit card debt has climbed for years, even as wages haven't kept pace with the highs. It's not just a spending problem, it's a friction problem. The good news is, friction is something you can rebuild yourself, even if the system won't do it for you. Something as simple as switching your default payment method or physically removing saved cards from checkout pages can restore some of that natural hesitation your brain used to have now. And that's exactly the kind of practical step we'll build on next. Which brings us to turning point 8, and it's probably the single most practical tool in this entire video. The 24-hour rule. Whenever you feel the urge to buy something non-essential, you simply wait 24 hours before you click buy. That's it. No spreadsheets, no willpower marathon, just one deliberate pause. And here's why. It works. Remember that dopamine spike from turning point 1? It peaks fast and fades fast, usually within minutes, not days. So by waiting 24 hours, you're not fighting the urge at its peak, you're not simply outlasting it. By the next day, the same item that felt urgent often feels optional, or you found a better way to do it. It works.
forgotten about it entirely. For bigger purchases, extend the window. Some people use a week for anything over. The exact number matters less than having one at all. A personal rule. That overrides the impulse before it overrides you. Pair this with removing saved payment methods, and you've built 2 simple layers of friction that do more than any amount of guilt or self-discipline ever could bow. And there's one more layer that ties it all together. That layer is turning point 9, spending with purpose instead of restriction. Most budgets fail not because people lack discipline grind. They fail because they're built entirely around restriction, and restriction is exhausting to sustain. A values-based approach flips the question. Instead of, what can I cut? You ask, what actually matters to me? And what you build your spending around that. Maybe travel matters deeply to you, but eating out 5 nights a week doesn't. So you spend generously on travel and ruthlessly cut the category that was never really necessary, aligned with your values in the first place. This is powerful because it removes the guilt from spending on things you genuinely care about, while making it far easier to say no to things you don't. You're no longer fighting every purchase. You're only questioning the ones that don't fit who you actually are, or what you're actually trying to build. Try this. Write down your top 3 financial values right now, and next time you're about to buy something, ask if it actually serves one of them. If it doesn't, that's your signal to pause. And that brings us to the 10th and final turning point, the one that ties everything together. None of this can succeed without. This requires a dramatic overhaul of your life. In fact, dramatic overhauls almost never stick. What actually works is small, boring, repeatable behavior change. If you apply just one of the tools from this video crowd, the 24-hour rule, removing saved cards, or naming your top 3 values to pound consistently for 1 year. The 24-hour rule, removing saved cards, or naming your top 3 values consistently for 1 year. And with those principles, we don't just spend, we build wealth that grows exponentially, creating true financial freedom. Week, invested instead of spent, can grow into thousands of dollars over a decade or par. Not because you became a different person overnight, but because you understood your own brain well enough to work with it, instead of constantly fighting it. That's really the whole idea behind Safe Money. Not perfection, not deprivation prone, or just awareness, a little friction, and spending that actually reflects who you are. Small, boring, repeatable pad, that's more the whole secret. And it's one you already have everything you need to start today. So let's bring this all together. Overspending was never a character flaw, but it was a brain running old. The psychology behind overspending involves the brain, heart, comparison, instant rewards, mental shortcuts, and debt that hides its own cost per pound. Every one of those forces is real, and every one of them is beatable. Not with more guilt, and not with a stricter budget you'll abandon in 3 weeks, but with small, specific. The friction, waiting 24 hours, removing a saved card, naming what you actually value. Pick just one of those and start today, not next month, not when things settle down today, because your brain is going to keep running the same old patterns until you consciously interrupt them. Awareness is the first step, and you already took it just by watching this. The next step is simply choosing one thing to do differently. It's the next time you reach for your card. That's it. That's the whole shift. Not perfection, just one honest pause at a time. Spend with purpose, not emotion cowed. And I'll see you in the next one. Every time you buy something you didn't plan to, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's not weakness, it's wiring. A tiny chemical reward fires the second you click buy. And that feeling is stronger than your budget, stronger than your goals.
Today, we're breaking open the psychology behind overspending out of hand and giving you a simple way to take control back.